On today's Locked On Jayhawks, one of the best players in the portal at any position is Darrion Williams from Texas Tech. We deep dive into him as a transfer portal target for KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you so much to the everydayers tuning into each and every episode. And you can be an everydayer if you tune in every day on our YouTube page or anywhere that you get your audio side of things with our podcasts on that end of things. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are going to be breaking down Darrion Williams, the transfer wing from Texas Tech, what he would bring to the table just in general, his scouting report, how he would fit in, I guess, at Kansas. And then we'll also get into some of the latest news, some interesting either players, doing things in the portal, entering the portal. KU women's basketball gets a commitment out of the portal. So we'll get into all that on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. All right, Darrion Williams. He is a 6'6" wing, and unlike some other players that we've done deep dives on, you might be a little more familiar with this guy because Kansas saw him this past year playing for Texas Tech, and he just went on a deep NCAA tournament run and made some big shots along the way. And obviously, Kansas got familiar with him the season prior to when he was like 11 for 11 in that game in Lubbock and had like 30 points. So obviously, he's performed well in those specific games against Kansas. But overall, he is a 6'6" wing, 225 pounds. He can play the 3 or the 4. Prior to Texas Tech, he was at Nevada. So Tech for 2 years. Prior to that, he was at Nevada. And this past season had a really good year for Texas Tech. He was all Big 12. And basically, Texas Tech, I know it was public that JT Toppin, the Big 12 Player of the Year, is getting like $4 million to come back. They also have a young guard that they needed to pay a lot of NIL money to come back, and obviously other ventures into the portal that they were basically in a situation where they had to pick 2 of 3 players, and Williams is the one that ends up going into the portal because he's a senior with the guard that they bring in. You have the potential of having more years, so you can understand why that would happen if they have to choose from a monetary aspect, but it certainly leads to one of the best players, if not the best player in the portal. We will in segment 3 talk about a player who entered today who might, for my money, give Darrion Williams a run on that, but nonetheless, 15.1 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, really good passer, 3.6 assists per game. He's kind of the perfect college 4-man in today's day and age of what they are. 1.3 steals per game, 0.4 blocks per game, shot about 44% from the floor, 34% from 3 on a little over 4 attempts per game. Really good free throw shooter, 83.6% from the free throw line, although the irony is the front end of the 1-on-1. He was part of that for Tech against Florida, but over 3 free throw attempts per game. The effective field goal percentage, 49.5%. The true shooting percentage, 53.8%, which little on the lower end of things, but he's taking higher volume, so it's all good. The team is 13 points better offensively when he is on the floor for Texas Tech this year. That is a very big jump. And then the team was about 2 points better defensively with him on the floor. Bart Torvik, which, the top available transfers are sitting around a 5 on Torvik's transfer grades. He's a 4.3, so he's certainly up there. Strengths of the game for Darrion Williams, his effect on team spacing. You see that with the on-off numbers on the offensive end of the floor. They're 13 points better, essentially, when he is on the floor. But it also, you see that in the effective field goal percentage when he's on the floor. When Darrion Williams is in the game versus when he's on the bench for Tech this past season, the team's effective field goal percentage was 5 percentage points better when he was on the floor. So it's not just about what he brings to the table offensively. It's the threat that he brings that makes life easier on everybody else around him. And so even though his effective field goal percentage in a vacuum is below average, basically, his impact presence, his gravity, how he's guarded, those things, it opens up the floor for, players like JT Toppin and whoever else. And a big reason why is he is in the 67th percentile in 3-point percentage. He's in the 65th percentile for 3-point attempt rate. And he does it from all 3-point zones, 33.6% above the break, 37.5% in corner threes. Basically what that allows is you're getting, 65th percentile right around there is basically like above average to good. If you're getting above average to good 3-point shooting at the 4 position right? That really opens things up for the rest of your team. And then you add to it that when you put smaller defenders on him, Texas Tech loved to have him play kind of like booty ball, bully ball, post up if you put a guard on him. And then if you had the big on him, he was able to space the floor. So he became a matchup nightmare for other teams. And then you add to it that he was averaging 3.5 assists per game, finding open teammates. If you double him or you play certain defense that puts an emphasis on him, he's able to find his teammates. So the spacing he creates for others is so huge, and he becomes the perfect like teammate in a certain way on the offensive end of the floor. He also plays well in big moments. He was the one who, if you remember, Kansas came back and ended up tying the game late versus Texas Tech. The guy who hits the three that I forget what the exact score was. Maybe it was like 76-73 or something. I don't know why that's going in my head. That might be wrong. It was Darrion Williams hits the three, and then I think Kansas throws the ball out of bounds, and maybe they go down and hit a two, whatever it was. But like, he was the one who hit the big three. The bigger one in the Sweet 16, he's the one who hit the game-tying three that sent it to overtime against Arkansas. He averaged 21 points per game in the NCAA tournament. Now, he did not shoot well from three in the NCAA tournament. Most of that was in the Arkansas game. But if you take out the Arkansas game, which was his worst shooting game overall, if we're just talking overall shooting, not three-point shooting, he was 25 of 51, so about 50% in the other three games combined from the field, averaging 21 points per game in the NCAA tournament. And so obviously Tech's been a really good team these past 2 years, and Williams has been a big reason why. He was, one of their better players last season. I thought he was their second best player on this year's team, which is not a slight at all, because the best player on the team was the Big 12 Player of the Year. For my money, he was one of the 10 best players in the Big 12 this year. And so he's really had an effect on winning. Even his freshman season at Nevada, like you go back to that when he was there, they made the NCAA tournament at Nevada. So everywhere this dude has gone, they have won games. And I think that is an important thing to look at. Passing and playmaking is another strength here. 98th percentile for his position at assist rate. Theoretically, you bring Darrion Williams in, he's playing the four for you. One of the things that KJ Adams did well is KJ was a good passer for KU. Williams is even a better passer than KJ was. And obviously Williams, you're getting much more offense and shooting and stuff like that. But like, think about this, for instance. KJ Adams, who again, people view it as being a good passer, and I think he was a good passer, had a 14% assist rate. Now, some of those numbers go down because if DeJuan Harris and Hunter Dickinson have the ball, you're going to have less opportunities to get assists and stuff like that. But still, 14% assist rate, which was actually pretty good for KJ Adams. Williams, though, had a 22% assist rate. That's a big jump, right? 22 to 14. And to make things even better, Williams did it avoiding turnovers. Like, this is not a player who's getting a bunch of shots up and assists, but he's racking up turnovers. He's efficient, man. He was in the 76th percentile in turnover rate, and he was in the 95th percentile in assist to turnover rate. So really good there. He's got great touch, 95th percentile for his position in free throw shooting. He was also 62nd percentile in the paint. Struggled a little bit more at the rim because he's more of an undersized forward, 6'6", but he had a good floater game, good touch from that really 4 to 8 foot area that you kind of see. He was also 82nd percentile in fast break points per 40, which is honestly even more impressive once you consider Texas Tech plays at a below average pace, right? They're not a team who's getting up and down and running and gunning on the offensive end of the floor. So the fact that he was in the 82nd percentile for points in the fast break per 40 minutes tells you that he was very efficient about, getting into those opportunities and what he did with them. Again, Tech was 264th in the country and 12th in Big 12 only games in tempo. So they're not the slowest team in the world, but they're definitely not like fast or average in that way. The questions though for Darrion Williams, he's not the best rebounder in the world. 33rd percentile offensive rebound rate. So that would not be great. And then 45th percentile. So basically average, slightly below average in defensive rebounding rate. Now, I will say, to his credit, the year before, he was 76th percentile in defensive rebound rate. And so maybe you think about it, okay, this past year, if JT Toppin's gobbling up all the rebounds, his defensive rebound rate goes down. But the year before, when they didn't have Toppin, he was a good defensive rebounder. So, that is something to consider, though. He doesn't get to the free throw line much, even though he makes them, only 23rd percentile in free throw attempt rate. And then he struggled a little bit on 2-point shots. It's really just one area, but he was in the 23rd percentile for 2-point percentage among forwards. And it was something where, again, like he was good in the paint. He was above average and solid in the paint. It's at the rim where you see the struggles, being 6'6", being a guy who he's not a 6'6" like dude who's just running and jumping and dunking and throwing down huge dunks. He's not the best athlete in the world. Not that he's a bad athlete, but you see that come into play in terms of his at the rim percentage, and it hurts him there. Now, that said, if you view him as more of a guard, which essentially on the offensive end, he is more of a guard, being able to pass, being able to shoot the three ball, being able to space it a little bit. If you view him as a guard, then his 48.8% on 2-point shots overall is actually above average. Like DeJuan Harris was 49.2% on twos. That was 60th percentile, which is above average, right? So if you view Williams as a guard, then it's fine, the 2-point shooting. If you view him as a big playing the 4, then it's bad 2-point shooting. So it kind of just depends how you view it there. And then what is his level of defense? Like I said, he's not the greatest athlete in the world. I do think he has enough strength to hold up against guys that are bigger, but can he hold up against guys that are quicker? He was 39th percentile in Hakeem rate. But again, this is something where if you view him as a guard, it changes because his Hakeem rate, block plus steal percentage, gets tanked because of a low block rate. If you view him again as a lens of a fourth guard, his steal rate is 2.6%, which is the same steal rate as DeJuan Harris, who had a 74th steal rate for guards. So he was actually good with quick hands and getting steals. So overall, I think like he's a fine defender. He's strong. He has active hands for steals. He's just not the most athletic. He's not the lengthiest. So like there are limitations, but like Texas Tech has had a good defense these past couple of years. So I view this as a question in terms of like, I don't think he's like some huge, gigantic plus defender. I don't think he's going to hurt you there either, but it's not like a plus necessarily. Okay, how would he fit in with KU? This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Game Time. And there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game or, I don't know, maybe you want to go to a golfing event. Maybe you want to go to sports, something outside of sports, like a comedy event or a theater event, whatever. And if you're talking NBA playoffs, right, maybe you're driving down to an Oklahoma City Thunder game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the elite arena. And with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. With Game Time, they have last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you for being an everydayer if you are. And obviously you can check out Locked On College Basketball. Check out what else is going on around the transfer portal, or Locked On College Football. Transfer portal is about to hit there and get you ready for the fall with football season, anywhere that you get your podcast as well. All right, how exactly would Darrion Williams fit in with Kansas? So what he would add to the team? Well, he would add a level of spacing at the 4 that so it's one thing if Trey White is Kansas's 4, that would be more spacing than Kansas had at the 4 these past couple of years with KJ, obviously. It's another notch or two to go from that to Darrion Williams at the 4. And so from that standpoint, he adds spacing, he adds shooting, he adds offense. He would also add passing, right? Like having somebody who could pass like that as the 4, that would be a fun thing to work with Darren Peterson, right? That'd be a fun thing to work with Flory, Bidunga, and these guys. And the idea that you have a more defensive prospect in Flory, Bidunga, defensive and rebounding prospect in Flory, who's a really good athlete, with more of a strong physical 4-man who's more of the offensive guy in Williams, I think is a fun little pairing between the two of them. Plus, we get into the idea of with Trey White, that he can be the 3 or the 4. You like him better at the 4. With Williams, you like him better at the 4 as well than the 3. So is that a knock that it wouldn't work as well? But I think you're able to make it work because on the offensive end of the floor, you can use Williams more like a 3. Williams can shoot it like a 3 again, over 4 attempts per game, 34%, which is it's above average from 3 on solid volume for his position. You go back the year before though, he was in the high 40% from 3 on a bit lower volume. So there's a chance that Williams could even shoot 36, 37%. I think his career is 37% from 3. And so if you viewed Williams as a 3 on offense, where he's providing you spacing, and if you have a smaller 3 on him, he will just back him down in the post. Tech did that all season long. And then Trey White's your 4 on offense. And then on the defensive end, Trey White's athletic enough to be the 3 on defense. And Darrion Williams is more of your stronger guy to play down low as the 4 on defense. And then Trey White, if you have questions about Williams as a rebounder, Trey White's a very good rebounder. So I actually think it's a really good compliment that you could play White and Williams as 2 wings with Flory down low, and that would give you real size 3 through 5, right? I mean, it's not the size of having that 1-7-2 guy, but it's just like you get the girth of Williams, you get the length and the athleticism of White, you get the length and the athleticism of Flory. That would cause a lot of other teams problems in a lot of ways. So I actually like that fit in that perspective. And yeah, the idea that he is a good passer and playmaker means that he can kind of just fit in for any team, and you don't really have to worry about, like, is he just going to suck the life out of the basketball? No, like, that's not a thing for him. That's not something that I'm really worried about there. And then the fact that he's a good free throw shooter too means that you can keep him on the court late in games, and he's a smart player. He's somebody who makes key shots, and that's, it definitely is something where it's like, I think the expectation is going to be, oh, well, Darren Peterson, it's, you're down 2 late in the game, Darren Peterson's getting the shot, right? Doesn't hurt to have somebody else who, oh, they doubled Darren Peterson, he's going to fling it out up top, and this dude can hit clutch shots for you, right? And so I do think, like, the biggest questions you have about him, oh, well, if he's not the best rebounder, okay, but if Flory's this defensive and rebounding prospect, and Trey White's a good rebounder, that mitigates it a little bit, right? The idea that, he might just be an average defender instead of having potential to be like a great defender or something like that. Well, if Flory's this great shot blocker next to him, and again, you have Trey White, like, again, this continues to be a good fit here. So I love the fit. I said when I did my top 10 available portal prospects, he was number 1 for me. And I would stick with that. There might be one guy that we're about to talk about here in segment 3 that I would think about, who's a guard that we'll talk about here in a moment. But, like, it would just give you, I mean, think about too the lineup for KU. I mentioned 6'6", 6'7", and then with Flory, and it's a little misleading, right? Because, like, with Flory, you see 6'8" or 6'9", whatever he actually is. And, like, you can use it against Kansas in this argument and be like, oh, Kansas is tiny. If they're going 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", the wingspan's more important. And so you talk about it and having, multiple switchable wings with, like, Williams and White, having a dude at center with, like, a 7'2" wingspan who is a really good shot blocker, having a dude in Darren Peterson who's like 6'5" with like a 6'10" wingspan. I mean, that's basically 4 players who you could be able to switch at a lot of different positions, that you could have guarding a lot of different positions if you had to. And then you have Jaden Dawson, who's either a good defender if he's out there, or Marco Jackson was a really good defender his freshman season at Kansas, even though the offense wasn't totally there. The defense was for Marco in his first year. We'll see what he looks like coming back off the injury and stuff. But, like, point being, I would love this addition for KU, but then you start getting into the question too of, like, where does the NIL money come into play, right? Because this is going to be somebody who's going to demand a big NIL check, because there's going to be a lot of teams who want him, and because he's going to fit into a lot of teams, because he can be such a good complementary piece or the star on a team. Like, he can do kind of a little bit of both. So that's going to be very interesting where it sits. But, if you're Bill Self and you can get on the phone with one of your big donors and be like, trust me, this is the guy. I'm telling you, this is the one that you'd want to pay for. All right, let's finish up here. Latest news. There's a big-time portal entry today that I don't know that he's going to be ranked as, like, the number 1 portal guy available, but for my money, he certainly should be in the conversation. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have all-in-one convenience where instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, and you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts or on our YouTube page. All right, some of the latest news going on, some KU women's basketball news, but I want to talk about this player that I think has for my money, is one of the best players now in the portal, and that would be Xzayvier Brown. He is a guard from the Atlantic 10 who, for some I have Melvin Council in my head, and I keep needing to say St. Bonaventure. It's St. Joseph's, where she's coming from. And Brown is just this like stud of a guard who is everything you can imagine at the collegiate level in terms of being able to get his own shot off the bounce and being like proficient enough at it. And St. Joseph's was a team that like I was kind of hoping was going to win the Atlantic 10 tournament. I think they were like the 6th seed in it. They might have upset like their first team and then they lost after that. Because they had a couple dudes on their team that they would have been a very trendy like NCAA tournament pick. They ended up not making it. But I'm telling you, 17.6 points per game, 42% from the field, 35% from three. He shot 40% the year prior to that on obviously a little bit lower volume, but over 5 rebounds, over 4 assists per game, steal and a half per game. He's got good Hakeem numbers. The 3-point shooting is good for him. And again, the ability to create shots off the bounce, off the dribble, right? This kid is really good. And so if you are into the idea that you want Kansas to get back to the point where they have these guards who can score, and you want like the idea of having Darren Peterson next to a dude like that, having your new version of Frank and Devontae in a different way, I mean, you can't go wrong with what Brown would bring to the table. And so I don't know if Kansas is going to be in the running again. I'd imagine he's going to fetch a big NIL check. I don't know if that's something Kansas wants, if they want to more so look at wings or they want to more so look at just, kind of role players to fill out the roster. But yeah, that dude is certainly, maybe we'll do a deep dive on him because, Xzayvier Brown I'm telling you, that dude is a stud. Some other news, there was a Congolese big man, this according to Dushan London of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports, Paul Mbia, I'm not entirely sure pronunciation, but he's going to declare for the NBA draft, but he's also going to consider the college route. I think he's going to be like 20 years old, and he's setting up visits soon with NC State, Kansas, and Kansas State. I think this makes a lot of sense for Kansas. He's a more raw, athletic big man. You can bring somebody in who's not going to threaten Flory Bidunga in terms of, is he going to start or whatever, but he would give you real size and length off the bench. He would give you somebody who could come in and just rebound and play defense, and you hope to develop him in a year or two, and that he can be like I kind of like this idea of like, hey, just get the centers who are going to be defenders, rebounders, and dunk the basketball hard. Worked really well with Udoka, and I think it's going to work really well with Flory this year, right? And so if you can develop him into that too, like even better. But at the very least, if he's just more length to come off the bench, that's awesome. So that would be the one that I would definitely be interested in. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on him, although that's a little tougher to get, I guess, information on with, not coming from college basketball necessarily. And then Kansas women's basketball made an addition. Lily Meister, she is a transfer from Indiana, so you're getting a player coming from another Power 5 school. And Indiana's had a good little basketball team here over the last couple of years, and so it obviously makes you feel better when they're coming from a team who's like winning games. But Meister, 6.7 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game. I'd imagine both those are going to go up at Kansas because the role is probably going to be there. Also, she'll be moving into her senior year. She's 6'3", and that was the big thing Kansas was missing this past season. They didn't have the post presence inside, and so now you're bringing on this really good freshman recruiting class. Samaya Nichols back for her junior season. You bring on a real center. I'd imagine that there's still more work to be done in the transfer portal for Kansas, but that's a good start to it, that you needed a real presence down low. And you see some of the teams that Kansas played that had good post presence, and they put up, huge numbers against them. So you like to see the start for Brandon Schneider and company. It's going to be a very important season for the KU women's basketball team. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you next time for some more Portal Talk right here on Locked On Jayhawks.